Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. My name is Pooja Kothari, founder of Boundless Awareness. And with me today is a guest that I have been looking so forward to speaking with, Elaine Lin Herring. We met many months ago before the release of your book, Unlearning Silence. I can't wait for you all to meet Elaine. A little bit about Elaine. Elaine Lin Herring is a facilitator, writer, and speaker. She works with organizations and individuals to build skills in communication, collaboration, and conflict management. Oh, I can't wait to talk to you. Elaine has worked on 6 continents and has facilitated executive education at Harvard, Dartmouth, Tufts, UC Berkeley, and UCLA. She is a former advanced training director for the Harvard Mediation Program and a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School. She has worked with coal miners at BHP Billiton, microfinance organizers in East Africa, mental health professionals in China, and senior leadership at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Her clients include American Express, Chevron, Google, Nike, Novartis, PayPal, Pixar, and the Red Cross. She is the author of Unlearning Silence, How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. Just came out this year with Penguin Books. Elaine, welcome to Everyday Equity. We are so happy to have you. I'll turn it over to you to add anything to this really amazing bio.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to get to talk about everyday equity because the world can feel so overwhelming, particularly right now. There's so many things that deeply affect us. And so how are we supposed to show up every day for the things that we care about? So this conversation could not come at a better time. And thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And, I want to get started just right off the bat. What does everyday equity mean? How do you come into this inclusion, equity, belonging framework with your background? And also, what does it mean to you personally?
I love that question because my own journey has definitely been a journey. As an immigrant to the States, my parents very much took the stance of we should assimilate. That's how you survive. And
right.
you don't make a fuss and you put your head down and you do good work and it will be rewarded.
Yep. Same.
Right. And so many, we come from different backgrounds, different countries, different families, but that refrain and that approach seems so common, so universal. And it means fitting into a dominant paradigm that I didn't know what was baked into that dominant paradigm. I just knew that to stay here, to not get in trouble or reduce friction meant to try to blend in more. And I don't actually identify as a DEI person because I think it discounts what people who actually specialize in that area, all the skill set and insight they bring. Do I care about equity? Absolutely. Is everyday equity about showing up in ways that align with my values and figuring out how I can influence the world around me more into the world that I want to live in? And that world that I want to live in is where the ability to experience dignity, respect, belonging, love, even at home, is true for every human being, not just for a privileged few. And so I feel very midstream, as probably we all are, on a journey of figuring out what does equity look like in my life? How does it intersect with my work? Supporting people to develop skills for communicating, collaborating, managing conflict, knowing that there are power dynamics and systemic dynamics that are the backdrop for each of us as we move through the world.
It's not like our parents came here and they were like, let's give up our dignity so we can just put our head down and work.
I know.
But that seemed to be quite in conflict with, you and you and I grow up and we're like, wait a second, we can have it all. And not only that, we deserve to have it. how do we reconcile like those two different approaches, of our parents, coming here and being like, listen, it's about survival.
Yeah.
We got to just get our stuff together and like keep the family
Yeah.
functioning,
Yeah.
and especially the kids.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if I have the answer, but I can share my approach, which is I'm so grateful that they focused on survival, and that
yeah,
means that we have a different baseline. And so actually to honor the sacrifices that they made means that we continue to build upon the base. We're starting in a different place from my ability to speak English as fluently or without as much, any of that, that actually the baseline survival is no longer the baseline. And that means that we push forward with expectations and dreams and advocacy for a different baseline because that survival is settling. And that is my way of honoring what came before.
I'm bookmarking this time slot
Okay.
because that was just so well said, and something that I want to carry back with me.
Mm.
You're right. Yeah. The whole point is to continue moving the baseline, and
Mhm.
and hopefully our kids start at a even more advanced.
Completely. And I know people always talk about we've got to make it better for the next generation,
Yeah.
right? Or preserve the earth for the next generation. But when it comes to the workplace, I'm like, yes, I want it better for the next generation and I want it better for us now.
Yes.
And why wouldn't we?
Right.
Particularly because it's not a touchy-feely, let's make the workplace or our communities feel better for people so that there's more oxytocin flowing. That's a side effect of it. But if each of us is more whole as human beings, how much more can we show up for each other? That not just the loudest ideas, but the best ideas. I mean, the problems in this world are incredibly gnarly. Why wouldn't we want multiple perspectives and abilities to try to get to sustainable solutions? We're doing ourselves a disservice by squashing that talent and that perspective by keeping some folks at survival baseline.
Yeah. Bookmarking that. We really are. And my wife and I, we always say like the United States and most of the world has wasted, the resource of human beings by creating this, patriarchal
Totally.
white supremacist society. I mean, we've wasted so much potential.
Totally. Not just wasted potential, but also done incredible damage. Because when we do not recognize potential and talent as what it is, potential, talent, gifts, skills, abilities, but instead strip those away or force people to fall into and fit into the boxes that we've preordained are acceptable for them. I mean, I know, and I imagine anyone listening knows how deeply painful and how long the tail of damage is when you internalize messages that you are not good enough. That whether or not your manager intended to,
Mm-hmm.
the message you received was, oh, I guess my thoughts don't matter. I just better shut my mouth. And we internalize that as I'm the problem. I'm not good enough. And we are told you need to deal with your imposter syndrome or you need to have more confidence, right? It's some version of go fix yourself.
Yeah.
And how deeply entrenched that becomes in how we move through the world and how incredibly damaging. So we're not just missing out on potential. We've dug a deeper hole. There's that phrase that healed people can heal people or hurt people. And how many of us are walking around as hurt people without the opportunity to heal because the hurt keeps coming.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, uh, we're 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 moving into um, the heart and crux
Mm,
of your book. I want to talk a little bit more what not only spurred you to write this, but also if you could give us kind of like a peek into um, some of the approaches you have
yeah.
in your book and who they're for.
Mm. This book came about because I, like many people, received the advice you need to speak up, right? You need to speak up in order to be heard, in order to be promoted, in order to show that you're a value add.
Yeah, you
That's a
need
deep
to
breath.
lean in.
You need to lean in. And if it's not working for you, it's because you're not doing it right.
Yeah, it's you. You're not raising your hand enough.
And yet, so many of us know from lived experience, no, I did try. I did raise my hand. I did lean in. I can't contort myself anymore to lean in further. And when I spoke up, apparently it wasn't the right time, the right place, the right tone. I was too emotional, too loud, too direct. I can't be right. And I'll be honest, being in leadership development for more than a decade, I parroted that advice that was given me because it came from experts.
Right?
And yet we need to challenge also, who are the people we hold as experts?
Yep.
Who is that advice for? What perspective does it come from? What perspective is missing?
Hmm.
And I thought, I think we're getting it wrong. Because the reason I don't speak up is not because I don't have a voice or don't believe that I have something to add, although that doubt was certainly part of it. It is because I have learned and benefited and been rewarded for staying silent. Right? That immigration story of survival, keep your head down. It makes you a great entry level hire. Makes you a great worker, and someone else can take credit for your work and look really good and be promoted and rewarded.
Hmm.
And you are easy to work with and you don't rock the boat. But then you don't have executive presence, you're not leadership material, all of these things. And is it just my learned silence? No, because the way that even the well-intentioned leaders around me continue to interact with me silences me, right? You can speak up, but only in this way, only in this time, preordained when it has our stamp of approval on it, which gets us to the question of who is this book for? And it's something we really wrestled with. This book is actually for two audiences. My primary hope is that people who have been silenced, right, told they're not good enough, they have to make themselves small, it was really costly for them to speak up, right? You actually did it because someone told you to, and then they got defensive and they stopped inviting you to the meetings, all of that.
Yep.
That we would feel seen, known, and heard and realize, oh, it's not me. There's this thing called silence. It's playing a role in all of our interactions, and we need to unwind it. The second reader I'm trying to reach is well-intentioned leaders, because people can try as much to speak their mind, show up and bring their potential and talent. But if leaders are not creating the conditions to receive that, and as so many leaders are unintentionally sending the message, I don't care what you have to say, or make it so costly for people to show up, we as well-intentioned leaders, and I use we intentionally, are silencing the very people we claim to support and aim to support. So to really unleash talent and live more fully or lead well, we need to wrestle with this ways that we might silence ourselves, that we've learned it along the way, developed these unconscious habits that potentially served us at one point in time. And to ask the question, does it serve who I am today and who I want to become? The things that matter to me now, right? What's that new baseline?
Hmm.
And in what ways do I unintentionally silence the people around me? And can I own that impact? Because people can shout as loud as possible, but if we're not as leaders ready and willing to hear it, it doesn't it's a brick wall. And more shouting is not going to break that brick wall. And then to also acknowledge that silence is baked into the systems that we're all a part of, that privilege certain populations and dominant norms, right? The way that things have always been and just how they work often centers whiteness, as Dr. Janice Assam would tell us,
Mhm.
decentering whiteness. But we so often just assume that it is normal because that's the way that it has been. So I want us to have a more intellectually honest analysis and discussion about what's going on to prevent the damage that we talked about earlier in terms of damaging messaging. And also, if we can ask the right question, it gives us a better chance at actually solving for it. And I'll leave the verbal asterisk there because there's not a whole lot of incentive for people for whom the systems are currently working to be willing to change. So I'm aiming at the well-intentioned leader because I, as I know you have met so many leaders who genuinely want to support the people that they're leading and are confused as to why people don't come to them when they say my door is always open, and confused as to why didn't I hear about this earlier? You could have just told me.
Oh yeah.
I want to build a speak up culture.
Yeah.
Okay, there's so much
So,
embedded in that because it's not just as easy as speak up. So we've got to solve for silence.
yes, I love that. You know, people come into leadership positions, I mean, we all do, without the, I mean, the psychological understanding of
Mm,
incentivizing, listening,
yeah.
um, looking out for other nonverbal and verbal cues that, like, you know, so of course, if you just said, like, oh, yeah, my door's always open, it's like, no one's gonna, why would anyone come? No one's
Well,
coming to that.
you have a door. And there's a great HBR article about this, right? I think it's Megan Reitz who wrote it and team. You have a door, it's on your turf, you control the terms. So just think about the setup in and of itself. And there's also the shift of, as a leader, I don't think I've changed. And it may not actually be about me, but the fact that I inhabit the VP or EVP role, people have a perception of it. And so there's the disconnect between how I see myself. I'm a fallible human being. I bumble around. I don't really know what I'm doing, but people assume things about EVPs. And therefore, there's an inherent power dynamic that we need to
Of
actively
course,
work
yes.
through versus I'm not intimidating and just staying in the I don't understand why they perceive me in that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Dance.
yeah. You know, I feel like there's no greater way this really, it, like, smacks you in the face than parenting. You know, you look at a young kid, over the age of toddler, but still a
Okay.
young kid, and you're like, "How's your day? Good. What'd you do? Nothing." And then all of a sudden at nighttime, it's like a meme, right? They're like
Yes.
verbal diarrhea, like just can't stop talking about their day.
Yeah.
So it's like, it can't be like, "Oh, well, I asked and they said
Right.
nothing." So
Right. Right. And all of that is learned habit and expectation. Right. I recently had the conversation with my mom where she was like, well, we didn't know what was going on. We asked you, how's it going? Or how was school? And you said, okay. And so we thought, you're okay.
yeah.
And that, my point is, we all have a way of operating that often we've inherited or we've observed. And that continual learning and growth means to say, how well is that working? For the
Mhm.
purposes, if this is about equity, if this is about being belonging, if these are my values, how well is it working and what might I be able to learn? And the bedtime, I was going to say babbling, but sharing is such a great example because it is everybody gets there on their own time.
Yes.
And how do we design a way of communicating that works for all parties involved rather than expecting everyone to fit into a preordained norm or pattern? right? You've got to have that conversation right at pickup or else we're done.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and whose schedule does that benefit? You know, parents at bedtime are like, "When is this over?"
I'm having a
And
visceral reaction.
kids are like, "I'm just getting started." But,
Totally.
you know, so if it's like on my terms, you answer me how you are when it's
Yeah.
my, you know, it's like,
And it's not to say that this is my mother hat coming on. It's not to say that we at 10 o'clock are still indulging that conversation, but what is the negotiation? So we are co-creating, taking into account the different wiring, the different strengths, the processing styles, that we as human
yes,
beings are all different. Surprise, surprise. And also that moment of expressing clear intent, right? Hey, bud, I want to hear about your day. And I'm worried that we're not going to recharge your battery enough. I'm like replaying last night's conversation as I say this.
you recharge your battery.
If
Yes,
we don't
same.
get sleep tonight. So I would love to hear, and let's find a different time so that you can recharge your battery.
Yeah,
Right? That conversation, so we're not just shutting down and incentivizing silence because it's not a convenient or appropriate time. And
right.
appropriate based on whose norms.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Um, you know, we had this question, and I really, I know it's a little bit of a right turn, but
Mm.
I wanted to get your opinion on this.
You notice my deep breath.
Yeah. What is success
Yeah.
as a woman of color, as women of color? I feel like, you know, someone just recently said to me, like, Pooja, what's your benchmark? You keep
Mm,
moving your
mm,
benchmark so that you're never gonna consider whatever you've accomplished success if you
mhm,
keep moving the goalpost.
mhm,
And so what does success mean to us? And then of course you move the goalpost and you're like, oh, I didn't reach my
mm,
goal, that I just keep
mm.
moving, and you lack self-compassion. So yeah, what's your
Yeah.
approach and take on this?
My approach, I have to give credit to Deepa Purushothaman,
Hmm.
the author of The First, the Few, and the Only. Um, in the context of the conversation was in advance of my launching Unlearning Silence, the book, and her saying, you have to define success for yourself, because if you don't, other people will define it for you.
Yes.
And I thought that was so wise, because when it comes to a book, she said there are 5 or 8 different ways you could define success based on your values and your goals. So for me, I had a placeholder definition of success because I wasn't ready to commit yet, right? And I actually love the idea of a placeholder hypothesis to test something out, see how it feels, how it works, rather than feeding the perfectionist in us to say I've got to get it right before I can try something. My placeholder definition of success for the book was moving through launch with or actually baseline to stay sane, and then to move through launch with kindness and grace for myself and the people I encounter.
Mhm.
And that was intentional because those were things I could control. I could tie myself up in knots as to whether I hit a bestseller list or moved a million
Mhm.
copies of
Right.
books. And all of that, I could hustle harder, but so I set the baseline where I did of how do I want to move through this world? What are the things that matter to me? And I think everyone's definition of success is going to be different, but the agency that comes with determining your own definition of success is key, both from an internal locus of control, external locus of
Yep.
control piece. Um, and to also not underestimate how much work goes into just living every day. I don't want us to go back to a baseline of survival. And when there's a genocide going on, when people are starving, when progress that has been there's been so much hard work and effort to fight for progress seems like it's being rolled back. Plus the day to day the kids aren't going to sleep, and have I packed the lunches, and who's paying the bill? All of it is so overwhelming and can cause us to disengage, versus I remember the newborn days, success was, is everyone alive? Is everyone fed? And is everyone's butt wiped? And most days we could say yes. And that was success. And so to really give ourselves credit for, the world is not always kind. We have an opportunity to be kind to one another, to create the world that we want. But I found taking back my narrative and taking back my own definition of success, rather than how many millions of dollars of revenue am I bringing in, or what accolade have I gotten or not gotten, or does my life look like someone else's life? Those all, my life is not going to look like it, because I am not that person, nor do I aspire to be. I could spend my life trying to be a really good imitation of someone else, or I could spend my life trying to be a really amazing version of myself. How am I wired? What are my gifts? What are my skills? How can I show up? Who are the people I care most about? How do I want to be sure that I'm showing up in those aspects of my life? There is no one definition of success or what we should be chasing or working toward day to day. So my question is, what is your definition, right? The question to the listener is, what's your definition of success? So that if we each have one life to live, you're living a life that you can be proud of.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so many great quotes here.
Is that going on the timestamp?
It did. You have so much to offer. Could you offer our audience a piece of advice on building equity into their everyday lives? You and I might think about it a lot, but most people don't, and are just trying to get through the success, have a successful day. And what's one thing that people can start incorporating?
I actually would start with a mindset. And this is, to be a little nerdy, double loop learning, right? Because mindsets drive behaviors, which drive outcomes. So often, if people don't like the outcomes, they go to, what behavior do I have to change? But if actually the mindset is what drives the behavior. And the mindset I would start with is, my actions matter. My life matters. And part of why I start there is because in this world where there's so much going on and issues that feel maybe above our pay grade or out of our reach of influence, we can really start to question whether how we show up matters, whether we matter is a close piece to that. And so when we think about equity, it is each of our actions, our contributions, can either disrupt or perpetuate an existing norm. Right? Are you going to say something? Are you not going to say something? Are you going to let that comment go? Are you going to inquire as to why things seem different for these two people, even though they have the same job title? And it boils down to, can I, in the way that I show up day to day, actually make a difference? And my answer, if we had another half hour, we dive deeper into, but the answer is yes, right? How we show up with dignity and respect for each person that we encounter, whether that is the person you're walking down the street, whether that is the person at kid drop-off, the crossing guard, it actually matters in the world and the experience of the world that we are co-creating. And nothing is too small to influence the way that someone else experiences life today.
Oh, well, listen, this episode is full of like the best quotes I've ever heard.
Can I share just some context around that?
Yes,
Which is,
because that was like so deep. Yes.
oh, I'm so honored because writing Unlearning Silence and talking about it really is my own journey of unlearning silence.
Mm.
Maybe in a different context we go deeper into that, but I 3 years ago, 5 years ago did not think I had a voice. And so that you're like jotting down timestamps saying that there are gems is like, wow, it is, we cannot discover our own voices without action.
Yeah.
And so conversations like this, where it's like, oh, that thought that was in my head that in a different context someone might have told me was crazy or off target,
It-
apparently has value.
yeah. Tremendous value.
Thank you.
Tremendous. I love that. It's like seeing the potential just like turn into kinetic energy right in front of our eyes. It's really amazing, Elaine. You're
And
amazing.
it takes action though,
Yeah.
right? It can't just be in silence, and it is experimentation. It is community. None of us live life alone or can really grow alone. And so how do we hold space for each other to continue to grow? Thank you for holding space today
Oh.
and every day, as I know you do.
Elaine's book is Unlearning Silence: How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. This is like a must read for the decision makers, senior leaders, C-suite. Website is ElaineLinHerring.com, IG and LinkedIn at Elaine Lin Herring. Elaine, this has been like, anyway, you all will see below this episode all of these amazing quotes because there's too many, and I
Thank you.
Elaine, thank you so much.
It's a joy
And
to
to
be
all
with
of
you.
you, we will see you in 2 weeks. Elaine, you're the best. I want you to stay on just for a few more minutes. I'll see you all next time.